The human brain is not a static organ. It is an adaptable, dynamic structure capable of change at any stage of life. This ability, known as neuroplasticity, is the foundation for training your mind to win in every situation. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's capacity to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. These changes occur in response to learning, experience, environment, and deliberate practice. In other words, you are not born with a fixed mindset or capacity. You can literally train your brain to respond more effectively under stress, to remain focused in chaos, and to execute critical tasks under pressure by leveraging neuroplasticity. When you encounter a new challenge, your brain is presented with an opportunity to create or reinforce specific neural pathways. Repetition is key. If you respond to pressure with panic, and you do that repeatedly, those are the circuits that get strengthened. But if you train yourself to pause, breathe, and stay focused, those more adaptive circuits begin to take over. With enough repetition, the brain begins to default to these healthier patterns. The famous phrase, neurons that fire together wire together, is rooted in this principle. Each time you practice a behavior or thought pattern, you are laying down myelin around those neural circuits, making the behavior more automatic over time. This means that even your emotional responses, like fear, doubt, and frustration, can be rewired. For example, if your natural instinct in a high-pressure situation is to freeze or avoid, neuroplasticity allows you to train your brain to instead interpret that same situation as a challenge, an opportunity to focus, or even a call to action. Through repeated exposure to manageable stressors and consciously choosing productive responses, your brain begins to interpret similar situations differently over time. This is the biological basis of resilience. Resilience is not simply an attitude, it's a trained response rooted in neural adaptation. A practical example of this is seen in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, where individuals change their thought patterns by consistently challenging unhelpful beliefs. In essence, CBT is neuroplasticity in action. But even outside formal therapy, any consistent pattern of thought, focus, or behavior will shape your brain. That includes what you do when you wake up, how you talk to yourself when you fail, how you handle difficult conversations, and how you respond to obstacles. Every moment is a training moment. Intentionality is critical. Neuroplasticity is always happening, whether you're aware of it or not. If you live reactively, allowing distractions, fear, or negative thoughts to dominate, those pathways strengthen. But if you take conscious control, you can guide this plasticity toward high-performance outcomes. This is where protocols matter. Regular meditation, focused breathing, goal setting, and deliberate practice aren't just good habits. They are structural brain training tools. They alter the prefrontal cortex, the brain's decision-making center, enhancing your ability to control impulses and sustain attention. This training also strengthens your capacity to delay gratification and pursue long-term goals, which is essential for winning in unpredictable or extended challenges. High performers, whether in sports, business, or academia, don't just rely on talent. They build systems around them that reinforce winning behaviors, and over time, their brains reflect this optimization. They are not only mentally tougher, their actual neural circuits are more efficient and resilient. That's not metaphor. It's measurable through changes in brain scans and performance metrics. Importantly, neuroplasticity is not about perfection, it's about progression. You don't need to be flawless to grow. In fact, the process of correcting errors, what neuroscientists call error-related negativity, triggers deeper learning and stronger rewiring. So every time you reflect, adjust, and retree, you're building a brain that is better equipped to win in the future. And the earlier you begin, the stronger the foundation. But it's never too late. Studies show that even in older adults, the brain remains plastic with the right stimulation. In every situation, whether it's a setback, a high-stakes decision, or a physical challenge, you have the opportunity to shape how your brain responds. Winning is not an abstract ideal. It is a biological, trainable reality, and neuroplasticity is the mechanism that makes it possible. Stress is often misunderstood. It's seen as something harmful, something to avoid at all costs. But in reality, stress is a biological tool, a mechanism built into your nervous system to help you survive, adapt, and perform. When understood and used properly, stress is not a threat. It becomes a powerful ally. The key lies in how your brain and body interpret the signals that stress produces. Physiologically, stress is marked by the release of hormones like adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. These chemicals increase alertness, focus attention, elevate heart rate, and redirect blood flow to the muscles and brain. This is the body's way of saying something important is happening. Pay attention. Act now. If you train your mind to see these signals as preparation rather than panic, your entire relationship with stress changes. This is not about denying the discomfort that stress brings. Instead, it's about shifting your mindset and training your nervous system to recognize stress as an opportunity to focus and grow. There is strong scientific evidence showing that how you perceive stress directly influences its impact on your health and performance. People who believe that stress is harmful tend to suffer more negative effects from it. But individuals who view stress as enhancing, who interpret the racing heart and narrowed focus as tools rather than threats, tend to perform better, recover faster, and build greater resilience. This cognitive reframing is not just psychological. It triggers different biological pathways that protect and strengthen you. Training the mind to use stress effectively involves controlled exposure. Just like physical training builds stronger muscles by applying stress in manageable doses, the same applies to mental training. Placing yourself in uncomfortable but safe situations, public speaking, cold exposure, high-intensity exercise, deliberate fasting, forces your nervous system to adapt. Over time, you build what's known as stress resilience, the ability to remain calm and effective under pressure. Your brain, particularly areas like the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, learns how to regulate emotional and physiological responses more efficiently. You're not eliminating stress, you're training your body to handle it better. One of the most effective ways to build this skill is through breathwork. Simple techniques like physiological sighing, 2 inhales followed by a slow exhale, have been shown to quickly reduce stress levels by modulating the autonomic nervous system. When practiced regularly, breathwork becomes a tool you can use in any situation to regulate internal states without needing external change. It's not about controlling the situation, it's about controlling your response to it, and that is the hallmark of someone who wins, regardless of the circumstance. Another key factor is the role of attention. When you're under stress, your mind wants to narrow its focus onto the perceived threat. This is a survival mechanism. However, if you train yourself to control that focus, to widen or narrow it deliberately, you gain more control over your response. Visual focus becomes a lever. Softening your gaze can reduce internal arousal, while locking onto a fixed point can increase readiness. This is the biology of performance, not positive thinking. The direction of your attention changes the electrical activity in your brain, shaping your emotional and cognitive state in real time. The takeaway is clear. Stress is not your enemy. Chronic, unmanaged stress can be harmful, yes, but acute, properly interpreted stress is a growth tool. It allows you to access higher cognitive states, to push past old limits, and to reveal deeper levels of potential. High performers across domains, military, sports, entrepreneurship, don't avoid stress. They seek it in measured doses and use it as a testing ground for their minds. They train under pressure, so that pressure becomes a familiar, even productive environment. Winning in every situation doesn't come from being relaxed all the time. It comes from knowing how to shift between high alert and calm focus on command. The better you get at interpreting stress as a signal for growth rather than a threat to fear, the more you take control of your biology and your outcomes. Stress then becomes more than a reaction. It becomes a choice. And when you can choose how to respond, even under extreme conditions, you've already won. Where you place your eyes determines what your brain is focusing on. This might sound simple, but it is a deeply powerful principle grounded in the biology of the visual and attentional systems. The human visual system is not just a tool for seeing the world, it is a gateway into the nervous system. Your eyes are physically connected to the brain through the optic nerve, and more than half of your brain's real estate is involved in processing visual information. This means that what you look at and how you look at it directly influences your state of mind, your emotional regulation, and your ability to perform under pressure. When you are stressed or anxious, your eyes naturally move around more quickly. They scan, dart, and shift in rapid patterns. This chaotic visual behavior reflects what is happening inside the brain: heightened arousal, reduced clarity, and impaired decision making. Conversely, when you are calm, focused, and in control, your visual system becomes more stable. You tend to fix your gaze, reduce unnecessary eye movements, and focus intently on a single point. This isn't just a side effect of focus, it is one of the primary drivers of it. By learning to control your visual focus, you gain the ability to deliberately shift your internal state. For instance, maintaining a narrow and stable visual focus on a fixed point in your environment can signal to the brain that it's time to concentrate. This engages specific neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex responsible for decision making and attention. It suppresses activity in brain regions involved in threat detection, such as the amygdala, allowing you to feel more grounded even when the stakes are high. On the other hand, widening your gaze, what is called panoramic vision, can reduce internal stress. When you relax your eyes and take in more of the environment without focusing on anything specific, your autonomic nervous system begins to shift from sympathetic, fight or flight, to parasympathetic, the rest and digest. This is especially useful during recovery or when trying to de-escalate intense emotional states. In this way, visual strategies can be used both to ramp up focus and to calm the mind, depending on the goal. This is why so many high-performance training programs now include visual drills. In sports, elite athletes are taught how to lock their vision onto targets during moments of high pressure. In combat and tactical environments, visual control is critical for managing physiological arousal and making split-second decisions. Even in academic or creative work, keeping your gaze stable, especially during deep work sessions, can help sustain mental clarity and prevent cognitive fatigue. It's also worth noting that digital devices, which dominate most people's visual experience today, can severely disrupt this natural relationship, constantly shifting visual input from scrolling, notifications, and multitasking fragments attention and teaches the brain to be reactive instead of focused. By practicing intentional visual behavior, such as setting a specific point to focus on during work or deliberately softening your gaze during breaks, you can reverse this fragmentation and rebuild neural circuits that support sustained concentration and emotional regulation. Moreover, this visual attentional link extends into your emotional state. Studies have shown that eye movements can influence how you remember events, how you emotionally process experiences, and how you navigate social interactions. For example, looking slightly upward and forward tends to be associated with forward thinking and motivation, while downward gaze is linked to rumination or negative mood states. This means that even subtle changes in visual behavior can guide your mental state and help you maintain a mindset geared toward progress and performance. Training your visual focus, then, is not a passive process. It is an active skill that can be developed with practice. Begin by becoming aware of your gaze under different emotional states. Notice how it behaves when you're stressed, tired, focused, or relaxed. Then, start to use it deliberately. When you want to engage deeply in a task, anchor your gaze. When you feel overwhelmed, shift to panoramic vision and let your breath slow. These small shifts send powerful signals to the brain and gradually rewire your response to challenge. In short, the eyes are not just windows to the soul, they are levers for the brain. What you do with your visual system is what you do with your focus. And when you learn to direct your gaze with intention, you begin to master one of the most accessible and powerful tools for winning, regardless of the situation. Deliberate cold exposure and breathwork are two of the most effective tools for training the mind to remain calm and composed in the face of adversity. These practices are not just about physical endurance, they are about building the kind of mental resilience that allows you to operate with clarity, control, and precision under stress. The nervous system, specifically the autonomic nervous system, plays a central role in how we respond to challenges. It regulates functions like heart rate, breathing, and digestion, and it shifts between two primary states: sympathetic, which is responsible for the fight or flight response, and parasympathetic, which governs rest and recovery. Cold exposure and breathwork directly engage these systems, allowing you to practice switching between stress and recovery states on demand. When you voluntarily expose yourself to cold, such as stepping into an ice bath or taking a cold shower, you activate a controlled stress response. The immediate reaction is a surge in adrenaline and noradrenaline, increased heart rate, and rapid breathing. This mirrors the kind of stress response you might experience in a high-stakes situation like public speaking, a crucial decision, or an emergency. However, because you've chosen to enter the cold environment, your brain begins to learn that it can endure discomfort without panic. Over time, the nervous system adapts. You start to become more efficient at managing the physiological symptoms of stress, such as elevated heart rate and shallow breathing. In practical terms, this means that when real-world stressors hit, your system is already trained to stay calm and composed. Breathwork functions as a complementary tool. Your breathing is one of the only autonomic functions that you can control consciously, and by doing so, you can send signals directly to your brain to change your internal state. Fast, shallow breaths tend to amplify stress responses, while slow, deliberate breathing can shift the nervous system toward calm. A specific technique known as the physiological sigh, a double inhale followed by a long exhale, has been shown to be especially effective at reducing stress in real time. This is not just a meditative trick, it's a biological mechanism built into the human body to downregulate arousal. When practiced regularly, these breathing techniques become tools you can use anywhere before a performance, during a conflict, or in moments of intense pressure. What makes cold exposure and breathwork so powerful is their ability to simulate real stress in a safe, controlled environment. Each session becomes a kind of rehearsal for high-pressure situations. You experience the surge of adrenaline, the discomfort, the impulse to escape, and then you practice staying. You breathe through it. You observe your body without reacting impulsively. These experiences train the brain to separate sensation from emotion and reaction, a key skill in developing mental toughness. You're essentially rewiring your response system to choose focus and control over fear and panic. There is also a chemical aspect to this training. Cold exposure has been shown to increase baseline levels of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward. Unlike the short, addictive spikes of dopamine from things like social media or sugar, cold-induced dopamine increases are more sustained, leading to improved mood, drive, and mental clarity for hours afterward. This natural enhancement of neurochemistry helps reinforce the mindset that effort and discomfort can be rewarding, which is a foundational shift for anyone who wants to train their mind to win in challenging circumstances. Additionally, both cold exposure and breath work enhance your capacity to remain present. Presence is essential for high performance. When your attention is locked in the past or future, anxiety tends to rise, but these practices demand that you return to the present moment. When you're in cold water or consciously controlling your breath, you can't afford to be mentally distracted. You must be here now. Over time, this sharpens your ability to stay grounded in any situation, regardless of how chaotic it may be. These tools don't require expensive equipment, complicated routines, or hours of time. Just a few minutes each day, done consistently, can recondition your mind and body to respond with strength, clarity, and calm when it matters most. They are accessible, powerful, and deeply rooted in biology. And most importantly, they teach you this stress is not something to fear. It is something to train. When you master your response to discomfort, you unlock the ability to perform with intention, no matter the challenge. Mental focus is not a fixed trait. It is a trainable skill grounded in neurobiology. In today's world, where attention is constantly pulled in multiple directions, the ability to focus has become both rare and powerful. Training your mind to win begins with the deliberate practice of attention. Teaching your brain how to sustain concentration, resist distractions, and redirect focus when it drifts. At the core of this capacity lies the prefrontal cortex, a region of the brain responsible for executive functions like decision-making, planning, and impulse control. This area is highly trainable, and the more you challenge it with focused effort, the stronger and more efficient it becomes. Focus works like a spotlight. It highlights one object or idea while suppressing everything else. This selective attention allows you to channel cognitive resources toward what matters most. However, the modern environment is full of stimuli competing for that spotlight: notifications, emails, background noise, and even internal thoughts. Every time your attention shifts away from a task, there is a cost. The brain has to reorient, recalibrate, and reload information. These interruptions, even if brief, accumulate and degrade performance over time. That's why training deep focus is so important. It's not about eliminating all distractions forever. It's about building the ability to return to task quickly and with intention. One of the most effective ways to enhance focus is through what's known as deep work or single tasking. This involves setting aside uninterrupted blocks of time to concentrate on one cognitively demanding task without switching to other activities. During these sessions, the brain enters a state of heightened neural engagement where the circuits involved in problem solving, creativity, and critical thinking are activated and strengthened. The longer you remain in this state, the more efficient these circuits become. Neurochemically, this state is supported by dopamine and acetylcholine, neurotransmitters that enhance motivation, alertness, and memory. With repetition, this becomes a kind of mental groove your brain can enter more easily and sustain for longer periods. Another powerful tool for improving focus is mental visualization. This is the practice of vividly imagining the task or goal before engaging in it. Elite athletes, musicians, and surgeons often use visualization to mentally rehearse high-stakes performances. Neuroscience shows that when you imagine an action in detail, your brain activates many of the same neural pathways as when you physically perform it. This primes the nervous system, making the actual task feel more familiar and less stressful. Visualization also enhances clarity. When you know exactly what you're trying to achieve, the brain is more likely to filter out irrelevant information and stay locked in on the goal. Routines and environmental cues also play a significant role. The brain thrives on patterns. When you create consistent rituals around focused work, like using the same space, listening to specific types of music, or beginning with a breathing exercise, you build neural associations that signal to the brain it's time to engage. Over time, this reduces the mental energy needed to transition into focus and helps you build momentum. These small cues can become anchors that train the mind to shift states quickly and reliably. Managing internal distractions is equally critical. The mind naturally wanders, especially when faced with difficult tasks. Rather than resisting this tendency, training focus means learning to notice when attention drifts and gently returning it to the task. This practice, often developed through mindfulness or focused attention meditation, enhances metacognition, the awareness of your own thought processes. When you know your attention has wandered and you bring it back intentionally, you are strengthening the neural pathways responsible for cognitive control. Over time, this process leads to greater mental discipline and emotional regulation. Sleep, nutrition, and movement also affect focus in profound ways. Sleep deprivation impairs the prefrontal cortex, making it harder to sustain attention. Poor nutrition can destabilize energy and mood, both of which influence your ability to concentrate. Regular physical movement, especially cardiovascular exercise, increases blood flow to the brain and promotes the release of neurotrophic factors that support cognitive function. These foundational habits create the physiological conditions needed for peak mental performance. Ultimately, focus is the gateway to mastery. Whether you are trying to learn a skill, build a business, compete in sport, or overcome adversity, the ability to direct your attention fully and intentionally is what determines the outcome. The good news is this skill is entirely within your control. By training your focus through deliberate practice, environmental design, and cognitive awareness, you are teaching your brain to operate with precision, even in the most demanding situations. This is how you win, not just by trying harder, but by focusing smarter. The quality of your mental and physical performance is not just determined by how hard you push, but also by how well you recover. In neuroscience and physiology, recovery is not passive. It is an active process that determines your long-term adaptability, focus, and resilience. Training your mind to win in every situation is not just about stress exposure, discipline, or focus. It's equally about knowing when and how to restore your nervous system to a balanced, regenerative state. Without recovery, the brain loses clarity, the body loses vitality, and the entire system becomes less responsive to challenge. This is where sleep, non-sleep deep rest (NSDR), and state switching protocols become critical tools in building sustainable high performance. Sleep is the most fundamental form of recovery. It is during sleep that the brain performs essential functions like memory consolidation, synaptic pruning, and metabolic detoxification. Deep sleep stages, particularly slow wave sleep, allow for the downregulation of cortisol and the restoration of neurotransmitter levels, while REM sleep enhances emotional processing and creativity. Chronic sleep deprivation leads to cognitive deficits, emotional instability, and impaired decision-making, especially under stress. High performers treat sleep not as a luxury, but as a key element of mental training. They recognize that the ability to stay calm and focused during a crisis often starts with how well rested the brain is beforehand. Beyond sleep, the nervous system benefits greatly from brief periods of structured, intentional rest during the day. This is where non-sleep deep rest, NSDR techniques come in. NSDR refers to practices like yoga nidra, certain forms of guided hypnosis, or deep relaxation protocols that place the body in a low arousal state while keeping the mind lightly aware. These techniques allow the brain to drop into brainwave states similar to sleep, even while awake. The benefits of NSDR include faster recovery from mental fatigue, improved memory retention, and enhanced neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to learn and adapt. Even just 10 to 20 minutes of NSDR can reset the nervous system and significantly increase your capacity to perform under pressure later in the day. The ability to switch internal states, moving from high stress to calm, or from rest to readiness, is another core component of winning in any situation. This is governed by the autonomic nervous system and your capacity to regulate it consciously. Tools such as controlled breathing, visual focus strategies, and cognitive reframing allow you to influence whether you're in a sympathetic E alert or parasympathetic Z recovery state. Training this ability to shift states on command is like learning to use a clutch in a high-performance vehicle. It gives you control over your speed, power, and stability in a wide range of terrains. For instance, being able to deliberately activate a recovery state after a high-stakes event helps to clear stress hormones from your system and prepares you for the next challenge more effectively. Recovery is not just about what you avoid, but also what you include. Nutrition, hydration, light exposure, and social connection all play roles in recovery quality. Exposure to natural sunlight during the morning anchors your circadian rhythm, improving both sleep quality and energy levels during the day. Nutrients like magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids, and electrolytes support the brain's electrical and chemical balance, which influences mood and cognitive function. Even deliberate moments of positive social interaction stimulate the release of oxytocin, which counteracts stress and helps restore emotional balance. These factors, though often overlooked, act as subtle but powerful levers in optimizing recovery. There is also a psychological aspect to recovery that involves permission. Many driven individuals resist recovery because they equate rest with weakness or loss of momentum. But neuroscience shows the opposite. Intermittent recovery enhances performance and focus far more than nonstop effort. The most adaptive systems are not those that run at full capacity all the time, but those that cycle intelligently between effort and renewal. Training your mind to win includes training it to let go when it's time to rest. This allows your nervous system to repair, your cognition to sharpen, and your motivation to reset. Ultimately, the mind trained to win knows when to press forward and when to pull back. It doesn't confuse motion with progress or exhaustion with success. It understands that the greatest breakthroughs often occur after deep recovery, when the system has had time to integrate, regenerate, and prepare for the next leap forward. Recovery is not a retreat, it's a recalibration. And without it, even the strongest effort eventually breaks down. So to win in every situation, you must not only master stress, focus, and discipline, you must also master the art and science of recovery. This is what builds endurance, clarity, and the ability to rise again, stronger, sharper, and more resilient each time.